It's like I'm about to spill some tea, but I promise I'm not.
Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another tutorial video. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make some cool fantasy daggers, like this. For this particular tutorial, I made 8 different daggers, all of which are using Worbla from Worbla North America. You can use Worbla to create the entire dagger, like I did here, or you can use it to create a handle on a cool crystal resin blade, like I did with this one. If you'd like to learn how to make your own cool fantasy daggers, keep watching! Before you can make any daggers, you're going to need a template. You can either draw your own template like I'm doing, or you can create a template based off an existing design. Transfer your template to EVA foam and then cut it out with a sharp craft knife. I'm using 2 layers of 5mm EVA foam for each dagger, but you could also just use 8 or 10mm for a single layer. Now it's time for some sanding. Make sure you wear the proper eye and respiratory protection when sanding foam. Now take your piece of foam and your Dremel tool and begin gently sanding down the edge to mimic a sharpened edge of a blade. As is, the foam doesn't look much like a dagger. Adding that tapered, beveled edge makes it look a lot more realistic. The process of sanding foam can be pretty messy, as you can see. I always wear clothes that I don't wear about, and maybe a shower would be in order afterwards too. Because I use 2 layers of 5mm foam, I am simply gluing my layers together using some Super 77. You can add some 2mm details to your daggers before adding Worbla, or you can add all your detail after. To begin working with Worbla, you'll need a surface that you can get warm. You will also need your foam dagger, as well as 2 pieces of Worbla that are a little bit larger than your dagger. You will also need a heat gun, some sculpting tools if you added detail before, and something to cut with, either some scissors or a craft knife. Heat-safe gloves are also optional to protect your hands. Start by heating one of your 2 pieces of Worbla. You'll be able to tell when the Worbla is ready because it'll be warm and it'll also be very pliable. Worbla has one adhesive side, you can tell this because it's shiny. Go ahead and make sure you stick that side down to your foam dagger. If you had any raised foam details like I do, a sculpting tool can really help to press in the detail. Really shape your Worbla around all the curves and edges of your foam to get a nice shape. When you finished one side, go ahead and move on to the other. When everything is shaped and pressed to your liking, you can go ahead and trim off the excess either using some scissors or a craft knife. If you design a blade like I did that did not have a handle, you can go ahead and make a base out of some PVC pipe. With that pipe in place, you can begin decorating however you would like. I used all of my Worbla scraps to create a bunch of different details. The decoration stage is really going to depend on the end look that you're going for, plus the creative elements that you would like to have. Really just do whatever you want and have fun with it. When your daggers are fully decorated how you would like, it's time to prime. I like to use filler primer. I like to use 2 to 3 good coats, sanding in between as needed. While that primer dries, let's talk about a different kind of blade. To begin, you're going to need a template same as before. Trace your template onto foam core, bearing in mind that if you have an asymmetric shape, you're going to need to mirror it for either side. Next, transfer that template shape once again to some modeling clay. Roll your clay out to about 1/4 of an inch thick. It's better to go a little bit thinner here than thicker. When transferring your clay piece over to the foam core, make sure that you follow those lines that you traced from your template. It's important that everything fits within those template lines, as later when you're trying to stick 2 halves together you could have problems getting them to match. Using sculpting tools, go ahead and carve out any details and bevels that you would like on your dagger. This process is like sanding the bevel on the foam daggers. Once everything is sculpted to your liking, it's time to mold. To begin, go ahead and take some scraps of foam core and begin making a mold wall. Make sure to seal up the bottom and all of the edges really well with hot glue. The hot glue is going to act like a barrier to keep the silicone from oozing out. You're going to know immediately if you have a gap. Lastly, if you have any large open gaps, particularly in the corners, you can use some little bits of foam core to seal these up. This is really just to help save on silicone later. With the mold boxes ready, you can start mixing your silicone. Mix your silicone according to your package directions. Mix everything very thoroughly to an even color and then begin slowly pouring it from one corner. It's better to let the silicone ooze over your shape versus trying to just pour it directly on, as you might get air bubbles. Wait 12 to 24 hours and then you can remove your molds from the boxes. With your molds ready, you can begin casting in resin. Much like silicone, resin is a two-part mixing medium. Measure both parts according to your directions and mix everything very well. You can cast your blades in whatever color you would like. Here I'm doing some teals and greens. Just make sure that you use dyes that are appropriate for resin. Shimmery powdered pigments and glitter can also really add some dimension, but are not necessary. Leave your blades to cure for at least 24 hours or according to your package directions. Remember that each cast is just half of a blade. To make the full thing, you'll need to stick two halves together. I like to leave one half in the mold and then gently spread some more resin over the middle before sticking the other half on. I like to use Smooth-On's quick curing amber resin just to save time, but you could also use the same resin that you cast in. And some satisfying peeling coming in 3, 2, 1. Very carefully trim off any excess resin from around the edge of the blade, and then you can further clean it up using a Dremel tool to sand the edges. Like with the foam daggers, this process is kinda dusty. This step is completely optional, but the blades do look really nice when they're very shiny. To do this, I just coated each side with a little bit more of that quick curing Smooth-On resin. Your fancy crystal blade is going to need an equally fancy handle to go with it. To do this, you can start with a base of PVC pipe, much like you did with the foam dagger. Carefully heating your PVC can help make it slip over the edge of the blade much easier. I recommend using some heat-safe gloves when doing this, just to protect your hands. While the PVC pipe is hot, you can also curve it into some pretty cool shapes. If you'd rather not use PVC pipe, you could also fashion a handle out of Worbla. Worbla is really quite the moldable material. When it's heated, it's very soft and pliable, yet it's really nice and sturdy when it's cooled. You can really sculpt a lot of cool things out of Worbla. For one of my handles, I made a curved spirally shape and then added a cute little skull to it, and for another one, I actually mimicked a unicorn horn. The daggers with the PVC handles also received Worbla decorations. I decorated these much like I did the foam daggers. You can really do whatever you want here in this process, it's entirely up to you. You can go as detailed or as simple as you would like. Before doing painting, it's best to prime your handles. You'll need to mask off your blades first, this way you can protect all that pretty resin work. You can either mask the whole thing off using painter's tape like I did with this dagger, or my personal method of choice is to simply mask around the base of the handle and then wrap the rest of the blade in some type of plastic bag or some paper. This protects the whole thing without needing to use as much tape. If you have any handles with odd shapes like my skull here with the teeth, it's better to just pop the handle off and prime it this way. It's hard to tape around small details like this. Like before, I primed everything with filler primer and then I gave everything a coat of black base paint. As with much of this process, you can paint your daggers however you would like. It really all depends on what you want the end product to look like. I can give you some tips though. For metallics, I personally really like to use Rub and Buff. I find that it offers a nice metallic finish while adding some very easy shading to your piece. If you prefer not to use Rub and Buff, you could also spray your whole piece metallic with some type of rattle can, and you can add some details using either acrylic paint or an airbrush. With whatever painting method you use, it's worth taking the time to add shading and highlighting to your pieces as it really makes all of your details pop. In terms of decoration, I added some gems to some, leather handle wraps to others. One of them got some dangly bits for extra detail. I even added detail to some of my foam daggers with resin. With that, I'd say these daggers are completed. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you make any of your own Worbla daggers, please share them with me. I'd love to see them. If you happen to like this video, please subscribe for more tutorials in the future. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and goodbye!